Welcome to the Explainer. Let's get right into it, shall we? Today, we are unpacking the rather fascinating push and pull polymer market dynamics for the fourth week of August 2026, using data straight from Polymer Bazaar. If you've been keeping an eye on the markets lately, you know exactly how volatile things are out there. We've got a classic tug-of-war playing out right in front of us. Rising upstream costs and unexpected supply constraints are pulling hard in one direction, while really sluggish downstream demand is just dragging everything in the other. Here's a quick look at our agenda. We'll kick things off with a broad market overview and check in on Karachi import offers. From there, we'll cross over to Europe to break down polyolefins, styrenics, and PET, and then PVC, EVA, and ABS. Finally, we'll wrap it all up with some actionable strategic takeaways.
All right, Section 1, the market overview and drivers, the push and pull.
Before we even start crunching the raw numbers, we have to talk about the human element driving these trends, as overall business activity is uniformly suppressed right now, largely due to the Eid-e-Milad festival. This is acting as a massive anchor, just pulling demand downward across almost all segments. So keep in mind, any price increases we see today, they are fighting a serious uphill battle against this broad, regional market quietness. Moving into Section 2. Karachi import offers, specifically looking at CFR Karachi in US dollars per metric ton. Let's look closely at polyolefins for Karachi imports, because we've got some very clear benchmarks firmly established for the end of August 2026. Notice how tightly packed these numbers are. For polypropylene, we're seeing raffia right at $1,300 US dollars per metric ton, with copolymer pushing up just a bit to $1,345. Meanwhile, the high-density polyethylene grades, like injection molding and blow molding, are sitting just shy of that 1,300 mark, hovering around 1,280 to 1,290. This baseline is incredibly important for us. It essentially sets the stage and gives us a solid reference point for the global cost pressures we're about to dive into. Now contrast that with the rest of the Karachi CFR landscape. The stark difference here is wild. We've got PVC way down in the 850 range, which is a glaring indicator of just how much construction and infrastructure demand is struggling right now. But then look over at the styrenics. They are commanding significantly higher premiums. General-purpose polystyrene is sitting at $1,420, and ABS is pushing all the way up to $1,560. This massive spread tells a really compelling story about the vastly different supply chain realities hitting different materials right now. On to Section 3, polyolefins and the notable price hikes happening in Europe. Spoiler alert, supply constraints definitely won the tug-of-war here. Check out this jump for polypropylene. Unplanned production hiccups paired with some serious inland logistics bottlenecks forced a solid €60 spike. Homopolymer is now sitting at €1,180 per metric ton, and copolymer is up to $1,280. What you absolutely need to take away from this is that when physical supply gets choked off by unexpected outages, it completely overrides the fact that buyers are quiet during a festival season. The supply constraints simply forced those prices up. We are seeing a very similar narrative playing out for high-density polyethylene. Higher upstream feedstock costs basically backed producers into a corner, forcing them to hike rates across the board by 30 to 40 euros. Injection molding, for example, hit 1,125 euros. The dynamic here is actually pretty fascinating because, on the ground, converters are playing it very, very safe. They're sticking strictly to low-volume, hand-to-mouth purchasing. But again, that upstream cost push, just too strong to ignore. With linear low-density polyethylene, things get really interesting. We're looking at a completely split market. Standard butene, or C4 grades, were pushed up 30 euros to 1120 because of those same feedstock pressures we just talked about. But get this, the higher performance hexene C6 and metallacene grades, they held perfectly stable at 1195 and 1200 euros. This shows us a highly nuanced market where standard commodities are reacting strictly to basic costs, while the premium, higher-tier grades are finding an exact equilibrium with that subdued demand. And then we have LDPE, which took a sudden €30 jump up to 1,210 euros. And let me be clear, this wasn't some slow, gradual climb. This was driven directly by an unexpected plant shutdown. When a facility goes offline out of nowhere, regional supply tightens drastically and instantly. It immediately empowers producers to raise their asking prices, even when overall conversion demand is objectively soft. All right, Section 4, styrenics and PET, and the upward pressures they're currently facing. For polystyrene, the real villain of the story right now is transportation. Persistent logistics nightmares have severely limited prompt deliveries all across Europe.
Honestly, it didn't even matter that end-user demand hadn't improved. Just the sheer headache of getting material from point A to point B created enough upward pressure for a flat €20 hike across all grades. General purpose hit 1,600, high impact hit 1,700, and expandable polystyrene reached 1,915. In this specific case, logistics are absolutely dictating the premium.
PET, meanwhile, saw a much more modest €10 bump, bringing it to €1,210. Converters right now are heavily favoring cheaper imported alternatives, meaning domestic purchases are incredibly sluggish. Still, marginal domestic cost pressures provided just enough of a floor to force this minor upward tweak, even with that stiff import competition breathing down their necks.
Section 5. PVC, EVA, and ABS. This is where the story flips entirely, and we see some major market corrections.
I mean, talk about a dramatic correction. PVC basically fell off a cliff, dropping €50 down to $8.90. And what makes this so incredibly remarkable is that upstream ethylene contracts actually increased by €42.50. In any normal market, PVC prices would rise to absorb that cost. But here, the market totally failed to absorb it because of massive regional oversupply and absolutely dead downstream construction demand. The demand pull downward completely, 100%, shattered the cost push upward. For EVA, it's all about globalization right now. Prices dropped €10 uniformly across the board, low, medium, and high grades. Why? Because the European market just got hit with a wave of fresh import shipments arriving at the ports. When you take already weak regional demand and suddenly flood the market with fresh imported supply, spot offers have literally nowhere to go but down. Then we have ABS. It essentially just rolled over, completely flat at €1,895. Honestly, this specific polymer is the perfect poster child for our overall push and pull theme for August. The intense cost pressures on upstream feedstocks pushed exactly as hard as the incredibly dull downstream demand pulled. The result? A perfect stalemate that kept transaction levels completely unchanged. Section 6. Strategic Market Takeaways. Let's put this data to work. So what does this all mean for your strategy today? Let's break it down. First, brace yourself for continued volatility tied to unplanned outages. As we saw with PP and LDPE, a sudden physical shortage will trump weak demand every single time. Second, do not underestimate freight. Logistics bottlenecks are actively dictating market premiums right now. Just look at polystyrene. And third, if you are buying PVC or EVA, you are completely in the driver's seat. Oversupplied markets facing weak demand offer massive leverage for procurement teams to negotiate really aggressive terms. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to really think about. In a market caught in this relentless tug-of-war between supply-side costs and demand-side apathy, how quickly can your strategy adapt to an unexpected outage or a sudden flood of imports? You need real-time data to answer that confidently. I highly recommend using the Polymer Bazaar WhatsApp bot to track these volatile trends as they happen. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack all this today. Keep those strategies sharp, and we'll see you in the next explainer.